Hi, everyone, and welcome to May 10th, 2019 episode of Featured Gem Fridays. I am your host, Karina, from Karina Osborne Reiki Practitioner, and today I am featuring the beautiful gem, Tamara McDonald. She is the new owner of Guiding Hands, and she offers Death Doula services as well as CPR courses. Welcome, Tamara.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be a gem. Every woman likes to be called a gem, so that's wonderful.
Yes, and you are. I mean, especially the service that you're offering, I feel like it's so needed, especially right now. Our population is aging and people are getting sick all the time. And what better to be a precious gem in someone's kind of rocky journey, right? So
Absolutely. It's a blessing. I feel that it's a blessing to be able to accompany those who have been diagnosed with a limited illness, life-limiting illness, or those who are actively dying. It is definitely a blessing.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yes, I really appreciated the services that we got while my mom was passing. So
Yes.
absolutely. In saying that, I am very interested in hearing your journey to becoming a death doula as well as a CPR coach. For me, I'm going to be honest, it seems like kind of like different ends of the spectrum. However, it's also my understanding that people like to die on their terms, and some people might not always have a DNR in place, right? So I
Right.
think it is a needed service even at that end.
So you can only imagine how hard it was to come up with a name for my company. Because it's from two opposite spectrums when you look at it. I'm saving lives and helping and guiding people die naturally. It was really a struggle. It took me about 4 months to come up with some type of name, right? My husband had some names in mind, and I felt like they were more alongside of like a funeral home, or it was too much of the living portion. So that's how I came up with the Guiding Hand, because I actually guide people in saving lives in a medical emergency by being a first aid instructor. And I also guide people during that difficult time in their life along with their families. So the journey, where do I start? I never knew I would be sitting here speaking to you. I can say that right now. And I don't want to be emotional, but my journey, I think, started for me when I was born. It may sound silly to some, but I don't think that I chose to be a death doula. I think it chose me. My first death experience with death was when I was 10. And when I was 10, my nephew passed away of SIDS. So crib death, they used to call it back in that day. My memories of that are I was 10 and my cousin, who is my best friend, like my sister, that was her brother. So I saw all the grief that was around us. And now understanding all the components of grief and all the components of what happens to the family dynamics and children in the aspect of something like this, I get it. I get what the whole thing took place. But my job was always to take my cousin and to make sure that she was okay and to play with her in the other room. Kind of that old-fashioned be seen but not heard. But yet you still hear as a child. So I experienced grief at a very young age with my family. There was a lot of dynamics with anger, with frustration, just the whole, everything you can imagine in that ball of grief, I saw when I was 10. Then, of course, I moved on with my life. Everybody does, not realizing the effect that it would have on me. And then it became later, about 14 years ago, my youngest sister's baby, Alex, was diagnosed with leukemia at 1.5 years. It was a very big struggle for my sister, as you can imagine, having a child passing away. And again, a lot of my family was supportive, but not comfortable with what was happening, which I totally understand, but it seems to be that I was comfortable. So I spent time at Sick Kids and trying to guide my sister and help her because she really was struggling, of course. And I dropped everything and I moved in with her for 2 weeks because the final word was that Alex was not going into a second remission. And she was given that difficult choice where the doctor said, it's a fork in the road and it's your choice now. We can do an experimental drug on him that will most likely kill him violently within 24 hours. And Misty, when you're watching this, I'm sorry I'm bringing this up and if I affect your emotions. Or you can take him home. And I'm sorry, this part of my journey is very still emotional.
Yeah.
You can take him home and you can have him live the best quality of life possible. And my sister was so brave. She did that. She said, well, I'm taking him home. I want him to die in a comfortable atmosphere with his toys around him, with the people that love him. So I spent a few weeks living with my sister and helping and coping through this terrible time. So as you can imagine, the experience was horrible. When a child dies, it is horrible in itself, but dying of such a disease, there's other components that you see and you hear that I didn't know that I was that calm and that prepared for it. And I was. I would, put a little bit of stuff in my sister's tea that the doctor gave me so she could relax, and I'd have her lay on my lap and pat her head. And so it ended up that Alex took his last breath in our arms, and I sang Finger 11 if I traded it all to him. So every time I hear that song, I'm a mess. Yeah. And then, we move on from that and we grieve every day for the loss of my nephew. And, things just kept compiling where everyone would come to me and talk to me about struggles that they're having with dying of their relatives or their friends or terminal diagnosis. And then the big one was my father-in-law, who I love dearly and who was like my father. He came back from Florida and he had some pain in his chest, and I thought, oh, it's indigestion. And he was saying, no, it's not. No, it's not. Long story short, I was in the room with him when he got his diagnosis, and the doctor just leaned his head down and said, go home and have the best glass of scotch you have. Unfortunately, I don't have a time frame for you, but you have pancreatic cancer. So at that moment, I made the decision that my father-in-law was not going to go home alone and have nurses come into his home. He was going to pack up and move in with me, and he was going to die with me. Mm. Of course, I spoke to my husband, that's his father, and he was on board with it. And I brought my father-in-law home and I cared for him, and it was a short 5 weeks where he had taken his last breath. So when my father-in-law was living here, I was a death doula. I didn't even know that existed. I did all the things that now I've learned in my education. I did those things with him. The night that he passed away, he was laying in the bed downstairs and I cuddled up with him and we put on his favorite movie. And he had been in a coma for about 10 hours prior, but I knew he could hear me because I could feel him squeezing my hand. And, when I'd laugh at the movie and say, I can't believe I'm watching this stupid movie for you, he would squeeze my hand. And the odd thing is dates has always been a huge factor in my life. People seem to pass away on dates. My grandpa Christmas, my grandma Good Friday, my stepfather Thanksgiving. And this one was interesting because it was October the 2nd. Well, it was October the 1st. And it was 5 minutes after midnight. So October the 2nd now, which was my husband's birthday. And that's when my father-in-law took his last breath, with me lying there beside him. So of course I had the urge to, wash him, clean him, whatnot before they came to pick him up. And then we moved on from that. And then a short time after, my mom, who was 64, just fell to the floor and had a massive heart attack. And 3 weeks before she had her heart attack, she told me, I won't use the words, the language she told me, but she basically told me, don't you ever use your beep, beep, CPR on me if I fall dead. I'm ready to go. So it was really difficult because I had to look at her and I had to go, sorry, Mom, I got to try. So of course I did. And that was an awful experience because I teach it all the time. I teach first aid. I've done it for 24 years. This is supposed to be good. But everything that I teach about the ribs breaking, how you feel, it happened first class with myself and my mom. So I did revive her to the extent only to get her to the hospital and only to have to make the decision to disconnect her life support the next day, which was very difficult for my brother and sister and myself, as you can imagine. It being so close to my father-in-law's death, my sister and my husband were not able to come in the room with my brother and I when we were doing so. My mother-in-law was a huge support, love her dearly, and she was a great friend of my mom's, so it was very supportive. But the thing is, too, in between that time, we had also had 2 more deaths. So my husband's grandfather, my husband's grandmother passed away, and my aunt had passed away. Oh, wow. So we had that snowball effect of grief. There's no time to even look at the grief or to even to recognize it. So it's on to the next, on to the next. We were emptying and dealing with my father-in-law's estate, and now here I am cleaning my mother's estate up. And then shortly after, the person who is like my father, which was my Uncle Jim, he called me and he said he lived in BC, but we talked every night. We would, have a couple glasses of wine, talk for hours on the phone. He was my biggest cheerleader. And he then called me and said, I hate to tell you this, but Bonnie, his wife, is making me tell you because she said you have the right to know. But he said, sorry, kiddo, I have throat cancer. And I don't think I'm going to do any treatment because the treatment seems too evasive, etc. He then decided to do some of the treatment. It just wore him right down. Then shortly then after, I was on a plane out to BC to help my aunt, who was partially blind, just to do all the banking and to say goodbye to my uncle, which was so hard. I had to say goodbye to him knowing I'm getting on a plane the next day, and that was the last time that I would see him. Shortly then after, he called me when I was gardening, and he said, honey, I just want to say tonight's the night, and this will be the last conversation that we have. And that was difficult as well. So it just was like a snowballing effect. Mm-hmm. So I knew in my heart that I wanted to work with the dying people because I felt like, when you're given a terminal illness, you don't always want to tell the people that you love how you really feel. Everyone wants to protect the people that they love. And there's so many moving components. You're facing your mortality. You're facing the goals that you didn't achieve. You're facing the goals that you did, your regrets, whole ball of wax. I didn't know what that looked like. And I was up at my brother's cottage and I said to him, I said, I feel like there's something that's pulling me to work with the dying, but I don't know what that is. I don't want to be a PSW. That's not what I'm looking for. And my brother made a joke. He's like, well, build it. They will come. And I said, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do? Put an ad in the paper? Are you sick? Are you dying? Are you alone? Come see me, and then we kind of laughed at it all. But then shortly then after, about 8 months after, I was on the computer and just randomly this post came up, Death Doula. I'm like, what the heck is that? I started reading it and I'm like, that's me. So I started to get more intuitive and go with the flow of my gut. But all that time, I had a very great job. I've been an educator. I was working on the road. When you have a great job for a fantastic company and you're getting the RSPs and all your benefits, great paychecks. I didn't want to leave to open my own business because of that. Yeah. Well, lo and behold, again, the universe, I'm a 100% believer in that. The universe gave me the opportunity because my company let go, let's say, 700 people last year. Oh, wow. So when they let go 700 people, I was one of the first rounds of it. because of the seniority that I had, or whatever reasons it was, it fell into my lap. At first I was like, yes, I'm going to open my own business. I'm going to put all my skills together and I'm going to combine a business. It was great. But then the reality of losing my job hit me a few months after. And it may seem silly if anyone has never been in this position, but a lot of things would affect me. I'd open my closet and I'd see all my fancy clothes and I'd start bawling. Where am I going to wear all these again? I'm not that person from the dream team, and I'm not going downtown Toronto teaching 300 people. Who am I? What am I part of? Then I started to learn to meditate. And it was very difficult because I'm a very hyper person and I'm very passionate, so I couldn't concentrate. It took me a while, but I tell you, I got that down pat now, and I do it every day. So I'm a firm believer that meditation helped me to move me, and I manifested this whole journey, and now I'm here. And every day is a new challenge. Every day's some days are more of a struggle than others, but my passion is really to change. I want change for the dying. And I don't only mean when you're diagnosed with a terminal illness. Someone that is 20 years old could sit down with me and do an advanced care planning so they can live well before they die. How can you live your life fully to its expectations and grasp at everything when you haven't taken a look at what death would look like for you? Of course it can change, but if you have that plan in place, and I'm not talking about, oh, my funeral's planned at 20. No, I'm talking about what is it? What is it that you want to be remembered as? So if you write your own obituary prior, then you have something to live and make happen. So how are people going to remember you as that person if you don't know how to get to that person? So writing your obituary is important. You write it for yourself, and then you can know, well, that's the way I want to be looked at. That's the way I want to live my life. So let's do that starting today. And then there's certain, questions that are asked is about medications, about treatments, about dying at home, about dying around family. Do you want ritual? Like it's just there's a whole workbook on it that clients can complete and then put away to the side. They don't have to worry about that. They can always go back and reflect and change as you move forward, but it does take a lot of burden off of people. I know for myself, I only started thinking about dying when everyone started to die. And I started to look at it, and I started to get older, and I went, oh, geez, this could happen to me. But you want to know the ironic part?
Always.
I enrolled in Death Doula school, and I enrolled, and 2 months after, the doctor told me I had a lump in my breast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I had to go for a biopsy, and it was a long, drawn out period. So keep in mind, I've just lost my whole shell of people, and now I have to face my own mortality. So I remember standing in the kitchen and saying, oh, yeah, if this is it, come on, let's go. I got my gloves on. I'm gonna fight it, right? Or I'm going to wrestle with it, I now say, because there is no fighting stuff. You wrestle, you buy more time, but it's about what you do with that more time, right? So I had to face that. And I guess, again, the universe had to allow me to feel what that feeling was before I can sit there with someone who's dying. Sure, I've done that, and I've seen all the grief and all the emotion, and I have all the education behind me. Well, what does it really feel like in your soul? So I had to face that, and it was terrifying. I'm blessed. My biopsy came back. I was good. Everything was good. So I'm here. I didn't have to have any surgeries. I was clean of cancer, but I did have to go through that 5 weeks of the what if and what am I going to do? And my biggest the thing I strive for my whole life is my son. My son has always been my number one person. That's why I used to get up in the morning. That's why I went to school. Everything was to show my son that you can do anything. It doesn't matter if you're a single mom, what you got to fight, you got to keep going, right? So that was my biggest fear, is how on earth am I going to tell my son? And I was terrified. Luckily, I didn't have to. I got to call him and then tell him, oh, guess what? I'm okay, but you don't know what's happened to me. And of course, he didn't like that. He's like,
Right.
you never do that again. You tell me the minute something goes wrong. But again, to protect, right? It all comes back to protecting your loved ones.
Yeah.
And for me, I felt like, oh my goodness, this is going to throw him over the edge. He just lost his grandma, who's the next best thing to me. Yeah. So it was very much an emotional time, but I had to go through it to bring me where I am today. Part of the big thing that I'm doing right now, and I'm finding again that the universe is pulling me towards, is because I've worked with a lot of grief and a lot of children. I am just presently taking a University of Toronto grief counseling course, and I'm at the end. So I have one more course to do, one more weekend course to do. So it's 6 modules, very intense. It pulls back a lot of layers of that onion that you got to deal with yourself. So when I'm done the course, I'm emotionally drained. But I'm really leaning towards, I want to be able to offer some group counseling to children who are struggling with grief as well. Grief is a little bit different for children because they snap in and out of it, and they look at it a different way. They're beautiful. Children are beautiful. Their innocence are beautiful. And grief doesn't take it. We could learn a lot from children. But the one thing that really intrigues me is they're no different than the adult when it comes to protecting someone. Right. So when you ask a child, I understand you feel that way, that your sister passed away and you're very sad. Have you told your mommy or daddy? They'll say no. Why? Because I don't want to make my mommy cry. So they need a space, a safe space as well, to, depending on their age group, to deal with their grief and their, through activities, through peers, etc. So that's what brought me to the Death Doula component of my business. First aid has just always been something that I've done, and I just think it fits well to save a life as well. It feels good to know that someone could help someone in a medical emergency. So that's kind of where I'm at with my business.
Wow. That story was so powerful. So thank you, first of all, so much for sharing that, because I think, especially as business owners, it's really hard for sometimes people to relate to us, especially in fields where we're in that supportive role, right? Like, people want to be able to trust that energy, that reassurance. And knowing your story, I mean, regardless, when I walk into your presence, I feel very welcomed. But knowing that story, it makes it more relatable. It makes me feel like I'm not unburdening on you, because you know that burden already, right? Of what grief holds. Mm-hmm. Second of all, the fact that you are taking that grief course so that you can offer grief counseling, especially to children, is so needed. After my mother passed away, we were really trying to find a place that my oldest nephew, who was 4 at the time, but the oldest child, I find, is always so much more advanced because they've been around adults so much, right? Mm-hmm. Find a place for him that he could offload and talk about his grief. And they were like, we'll just put him in counseling. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not the same. Like, he doesn't need to talk about problems. He needs to talk about his grief. And so we didn't find a place, and we just ended up being his kind of grief counselors. So I love that you are opening that service up for adults, but also for children, because it is very, very needed. But as well, tell me a little bit more about what a death doula does. Like, we know, like you said, that we could talk about legacy planning with regards to our obituary. I believe that's what legacy planning is, if I'm correct. And then We know that you offer the grief counseling, and you spoke a little bit about rituals and stuff like that. But really, what is a death doula?
So a death doula is very much like a birthing doula. My sister-in-law is a birthing doula, and we've talked several times about the similarities. So a death doula is pretty much there to guide and walk alongside the medical team and the family and the person that's dying. So holding space is something we use a lot as vocabulary as death doulas. Sometimes it's just about that, holding space, sitting with the person. No words are necessary. But then there are times when, you know, that caregiver. So in my case with my father-in-law, I had volunteers that would come to the house. I didn't want that. I wanted to do it all myself, but that creates burnout. So if you can find someone that you trust and that you have that connection with, you're able to leave your home and to go have a coffee with your girlfriend, remove yourself from that space, because you can't be a caregiver if you have nothing to give. You have to fill up your own engine in order to keep providing. So part of what we do is bedside. We will, you know, give some caregiver relief where we can help with that. One of the big parts of it is the planning. So I can use some examples for you. So some examples, let's say, of rituals. So if someone's passing away, for myself, I know that I want to, if I have the option of dying around water, I would like to do that. I'd like to die at the cottage, outside, with the birds around, with maybe a certain amount of people that I want there. I'd like to have candles. I'd like to have soft music. People deserve to die the way that they want. It's not that we're institutionalizing people that are dying, but we are. We don't mean to. It's just what's happening. We have, you know, gaps in the medical system all over. We have an aging population. What are we doing with them all? So our job as a death doula is to go in and say, how do you want, what does this look like for you? Everyone is different. There may even be some family turmoil there that we can help out with. That's something I've had to deal with as well, and work through. Sometimes there's some family members that aren't comfortable with it, or maybe there's been arguments, they haven't talked in a long time. You know, we don't want people to die with regrets or leaving people with regrets. So in a case of one person that I had helped die, they did have family members, brothers and sisters, that had been estranged, and there was an argument. So it was a simple fact of, so how can we help you and your brother and sister not have to deal with this after you're gone? We want peace. So in this case, it was a simple letter. So I wrote the letter, they told me what to say, and then the letter was delivered to those family members. That gives a huge relief on people when someone passes away. So like I had mentioned, it could start right from the beginning. Maybe someone's diagnosed, they could live for 5 years. Yeah, 20 years. It doesn't mean that there's not a place for us. A death doula is not only called in the last 24 hours of life. You get the most out of what we do when you bring us in early, even if you're not diagnosed that you're dying right away. Okay, so I've got a sickness and let's make a plan. Or I don't have a sickness, but I want a plan so I can live well. And then we work through and walk through all those stages with you, and, you know, try to make it the best situation possible. It's never easy when someone dies. I know myself, I still have moments. Right now for me, as you probably can relate, Mother's Day is coming up. I hate Mother's Day. I'm a mother, but I hate Mother's Day. Yesterday I had a bad day because I opened up Facebook and they had all the Mother's Day specials. And I remember closing it and saying, I don't have a mother. And then that set my tone for the whole day. So I had to do self-talk. And that's a lot of things that people go through, again, with the grief process. So when someone calls a death doula, we need to have a one-on-one consultation with the dying and their families.
Hmm.
We want to know, what is it going to look like for you? What's the direction? Weigh all options. We are not a medical team. We don't deliver anything medical. We can bring in holistic for you. You know, we have a lot of connections where Reiki can be done, aromatherapy, reflexology, touch. There's so many different components that can help someone feel at peace, and their family as well, when they are dying.
Right. So what I hear you kind of saying is that you make the conversation and you make the act itself comfortable by bringing it to the light and not having it so taboo.
That's right. It's difficult in our time right now because society and our culture, it is taboo to talk about dying, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. It's a negative, and we're all about staying positive all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a documentary, Endgame. I love it. Loved everything that it had to offer. But one of the things that really stayed with me was that simple time when the doctor said to the person, I'm not asking you to be friends with death. I'm just asking you to have some type of relationship. And that's my wish for everyone, is just to realize you are going to die. We're not immortal. It's the one thing that everyone in the world has in common, guys. We're all going to die someday, whether it's a traumatic death suddenly, whether it's a terminal illness, it's going to happen. Yeah. So why not recognize that it's going to happen, have a look at it, figure out what it looks like for you, plan it, put it aside. So then you can move forward and live to your fullest, knowing that you'll be able to cope, and your family will, when the time does come. And that's my biggest wish, is the awareness right now. It's just getting it out there, right?
Yeah. And speaking of awareness, I think this is a really great segue to talk about how you and one of your sister death doulas are trying to bring more awareness to the Niagara region. And I'm probably going to say eventually the GTA and stuff, because you guys are just, you're amazing. And that's with death cafes. So yeah. I had the privilege to joining you on your first death cafe, but I'd love you to speak about that and just what those are and how people can get involved, or even just contact you to say, hey, I want to come to your next death cafe. So
perfect. So basically, when I was in the death doula course, I met a wonderful woman named Maggie, who I know has been a gem on your show, and she is actually a true gem. And after the course, again, we were brought together somehow, and she had opened her company, Whispers of Wisdom, Guiding Hand. So we started to work together very closely on the death doula component, because we're very similar with our passions, our visions, our goals. And we came up with last week the new little slogan that we're, every time we do anything, Death Cafe or any awareness about death, we've combined ourselves, because we feel like a village is a lot more powerful than doing it individually. So we've kind of put the thing out there, we're now guiding whispers.
Oh,
so, yeah, a little Guiding Whispers Death Cafe. So we did our first one, and we didn't know what to expect. It was our first death cafe, but it went smoothly. We had a list of questions to go in there for topics. We just had to read one, and then it flew right from there without having to bring up any other questions, because the people that walk into a death cafe, they don't know what to expect either. But once they sit down and they feel the energy, that it's a safe, confidential place to share what they're feeling or what their family is feeling, people just open up. And more people need that. It's about creating that awareness. And Maggie and I are really looking forward to creating more death cafes around the GTA, and who knows, like I said, where that will bring us.
Yeah.
But it is exciting. And again, it's all about having the people feel very comfortable and safe in that space. One of myself and Maggie's major things is confidentiality. So confidentiality is key, because we want people to know that they can come in and they can trust that space. You can say whatever it is, you're not judged. There's no judgment. And it's all confident. It's all in that room, that safe space. It doesn't leave there. So again, it went so well. It was enlightening to see that people are willing to open up. And I really do hope that it did help some of the individuals that were there. My niece was there, and she's gone through a lot of trauma and death in her life, as well as my sister. And I saw them open up in ways that they've never opened up. Even though I'm their sister and I sit here with them in that safe space in a death cafe, they were able to open up and to release some of the questions that will never be answered, because we can't get answers all the time. We have to just learn and recognize that we're not going to get an answer. How do we move forward and cope? So that's part of the whole death cafe movement, is just a safe space to talk about death, whether it's about planning your death, whether it's about talking about someone you've lost, whatever it is you want to bring to that conversation, that's the safe space to do it.
I think that death is one of the things that we're guaranteed in life. That's the biggest mystery, right? We don't know what happens, right? We can all theorize and give our own inputs, but really it is a mystery. And I think that's what makes it so taboo, but also what makes it, people want to talk about it and come to these death cafes and open up and just be able to share. And I have to say, being there, it felt very safe. It felt very natural to talk about it. It felt like relief, kind of, to just talk openly about, deaths that I've experienced in my life, but also hearing about how other people think, what happens on the other side, or if there is another side. And just, it was very magical. And I feel like 2 hours was almost not enough time. Like, we needed more time. But it
flew by really fast.
It did. It flew by very, very fast. So let's get into your CPR side a little bit, because you also offer a really amazing service that, like, when I need recertification, I think I'm going to do this. You offer CPR parties.
Yeah.
So tell me about those.
It's very exciting. So I am an instructor for the Canadian Red Cross, but I am a provider for the Certified Emergency Response Team, which is CERT. So I chose to go under a provider for CERT for the purpose of flexibility and the customization I'm allowed to do with that program. So it's WMIS approved, same type of skill, the exact same skills that every first aid provider would deliver are delivered through CERT. The difference is I'm allowed to customize the course. So if I'm working with a business, like I work with some businesses, I'll go into their factory. They will tell me the situations that could happen in their factory, and I will build upon that. So of course they're getting the skills that are mandatory, but now instead of working with them about, poison ivy, well, poison ivy is not an issue for them in their environment. It's more about the toxins in their chemicals. So then I can customize the course to fit that need. So then I came up with the niche. Well, I need something different. Everybody's got everybody can offer this. What am I going to do different? So I said, well, we do Tupperware parties, right? We do jewelry parties. Why don't we do a first aid party? Isn't that more fun? Have a bunch of girlfriends around, invite girlfriends. You can have your first aid course, get recertified, or even just have a specific workshop. And then you can go off and have your dinner. So it's just a little bit of a different take on it. And not only to be recertified. So recertified is one thing, but a lot of just mommy groups. So if you belong to a mommy group, what's important to you? I want to know what to do if my child chokes. So let's have a workshop. get me in for a workshop with your girlfriends and let's go over some major skills that can help you save a life. So it gives that different twist on it as well. I'm very excited and proud of that component of my business because it's not offered. And I love the concept of it, is having girlfriends over, working through it, having a workshop. I'll also add too that I've put myself out there in the community, and I'm offering free workshops to a couple of places that I've reached out to, women's shelters being one. So next week I'm offering a 2-hour workshop, or delivering a 2-hour workshop for an abused woman's shelter in the region. And I feel that's very dear to my heart and very important for women and for everyone to gain skills and knowledge. So I can pretty much do whatever you need me to do. You need me to do a workshop, you need me to do a full recertification, you need me to come to your school, your company, your house, I'm your person.
I think, I don't know if you know this, but I used to work with the homeless population so much, and working with homeless shelters and stuff. And that is such a needed service within that community. Not just for the workers, but for the people who need to utilize that service, because sometimes they don't feel comfortable going to doctors because doctors might have been those people that were, marginalizing them. And if they can have those practical skills while they're on the streets, or maybe when they're, like a sex worker, I feel like something happened to them, they need to kind of help a sister out or a brother out with repairing and not going and getting that judgment from a hospital. I mean, obviously, if it's super medical, they should still go, but what a great service. And thank you for offering that, because that just gave me chills and spoke right to my heart on that is needed. Huge.
I think it's really important, and one of my major goals and part of who I am is giving back to the community. So everybody does need to earn a living, absolutely. But you know what? It's so important, and it feels so good to give back to people who can't pay for the services. Why should they be discriminated? Their lives are just as important.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I really think, again, about that whole universe is I started off in nursing school, and I backed out after first semester because the course load was too hard, and I was a single mom. Then I went into business. I graduated from business. Then I moved over to being an educator, took all kinds of courses on adult education, went to Brock University for adult psychology, added on courses, just online training, and then did that on the road, and then full ROM back to where I started, where I'm that caregiver. So again, it's just ironic and amazing how it came full circle for me. And I'm just so proud and don't regret any of the situations or anything that I've seen or been through in my life or others, because it brought me to where I am now, and I really have a passion about giving back.
I think this would be the most perfect time to talk about. Normally I would ask for a mantra or an affirmation, but your company actually has a mission statement, and I feel like this would be the perfect time for that. So let us have it.
Okay, so my mission statement is inspire, empower, and support. Oh, sorry, what happened to can you still, okay. Inspire, empower, and support. That is what the 3 words, and that is my mission statement that I want to have my business grow upon, and to really thrive in the community on giving back.
And I think just with all the services and the education that you're giving yourself and to others, that mission statement really just rounds out everything that you're trying to do, and really just embodies the vision that you have for this career that you've chosen for yourself. Let's talk about how people can find you, You're, I know you're on Facebook at Guiding Hand Inc., correct?
Yeah.
And then your website is?
www.guidinghand.ca. I'm also on LinkedIn under Tamara McDonald, and Instagram is Tamara McDonald 68. So there's several different ways you can reach out to me for sure.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything that we haven't spoke about that you would like to say a little bit about before we head off?
I just want to circle back to the death doula for a moment. I feel like it's important for people to understand that a death doula has no judgment. So my beliefs may be one thing and somebody else's may be another. So I might believe there's an afterlife. I don't inflict my beliefs on anyone. It's all about that person who is dying. Some people believe there is, some people believe there isn't, some people believe there's a million different things that people believe in, and it's all about respect. It's about respecting their beliefs. So I really think that's important to put out there so people do understand that a death doula is not about religion at all. It's about doing whatever that person and guiding that specific person to where they need to be.
I think that was perfect because that might not have been clear from our talk previously. So thank you so much for adding that juicy little tidbit in. I like to say that to people too, because a lot of what I do is kind of similar. It seems faith-based, but I always say, take what you like and leave what you don't, because I'm not here to impose my views on others. And I love that you have the same kind of mentality. So I will be sure to link up all of the ways in order to get a hold of Tamara in the comment section. Again, thank you so much, Tamara, for joining me today. It was such a pleasure, and you are such a gem.
You know what, Karina, thank you so much. You're a gem yourself. I really appreciate having the opportunity. I do have to say it's, you feel a little vulnerable on these calls, so this is all new to me. But yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. If you would like to be a featured gem, please reach out. No business is too big or too small, and you are one in a million. Have a great day, all, and thank you.